This house at West Wallsend was built by the Coal Association last year. Since then, Panel 3 of the West Wallsend colliery, which passes directly underneath the house, has been longwall mined. The house has been closely monitored. During the early stages, hairline cracks appeared in walls and doors jammed, but very little change was detected once the house began to settle. According to this report by Ken Lees of Newcastle firm Property and Construction Reports, most of the damage to the house was most likely caused by natural movements in the soil.
Ken's really said that in his experience generally around town, he can't really pick the difference between what's due to subsidence and what's due to subsequent soil movement because of wetting and drying of the soil.
John Hannon of the New South Wales Coal Association says he's not surprised by Mr Lee's findings and hopes the report will go some way to eliminating what he calls hysteria over mine subsidence.
We really set out to show people what would happen to their own home, your standard sort of home. And I think most people who went through the place were fairly satisfied that the level of damage wasn't great. It was something they could live with. With a brand new home, nobody would be pleased with it, but in the knowledge that it's going to be repaired by the Mine Subsidence Board, I think most people would be fairly happy with the result.
The Mine Subsidence Board estimates $4,500 will repair the damage to the West Wallsend house. According to John Hannon, it could bring changes to the way the board assesses compensation claims. But Bevan Ramsden of the Marmong Point Bolton Point Progress Association says residents are concerned that the weather and soil movements are being used as an excuse for the real problem, and any type of damage to their houses is unacceptable. Stage 2 of the $1.5 million project begins next week. A house which includes a special cement slab designed to tolerate even greater levels of subsidence is being built at YE. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
G'day, Ben Allen here from Whitebridge High School, here as part of the School Industry Links program. And for the next hour, guess what? We're taking over 2KO. Yeah!
On Sunday night, a small band of teenagers will be on the air, broadcasting from the studios of Radio 2KO. 16-year-old Ben Allen will make his debut as a disc jockey in the competitive world of commercial radio. He'll present a one-hour program that he and his classmates from Whitebridge High have been working on for months.
Learned a lot about how much work goes into keeping a radio station on the air.
The show consists of music, interviews, a film review and, of course, commercials. The students have sold advertising space worth $1,800 and the money will be used to buy equipment for the school. This is part of an Education Department initiative to foster closer relations between schools and industry. But what does the boss of 2KO think about turning his station over to a group of teenagers?
If we can generate just half of that enthusiasm back to our listeners via the program, then the program itself, in itself will be a success.
The show will begin at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
This is the final chance these riders have of making the equestrian team for the Barcelona Olympics, so competition in the three-day event is stiff. But taking a powerful lead is Lochinvar rider Heath Ryan on Looking Good. He leads the competition on 40.6 points. Coming fourth is Prue Cribb of Allendale Lodge on Navarone. She's on 54.4 points, while fellow rider Craig Barrett on Bush Telegraph is in around 10th place. Tomorrow the riders are tested on their endurance with the cross-country event, while day 3 is show jumping. 4 riders and a reserve will be chosen in the equestrian team's event for the Olympics. So far, the Hunters contingent is looking good.
The 12 finalists were announced today at a lunch in Sydney. Novacastrian Kylie Walker was named the state's top travel assistant trainee. She completed her traineeship at Newcastle Travel earlier this year. Her job involves planning travel itineraries and assisting with international ticketing. She was pleased with the award.
Certainly it's a good opportunity and an achievement, I guess.
Brett Holtz of Muswellbrook is a final-year apprentice electrical fitter at Bayswater Power Station. He too has excelled in his chosen field. Brett is one of 6 finalists who are in the running for the coveted title of New South Wales Apprentice of the Year. The best apprentice and trainee will be announced by the Minister for Employment, John Fahey, next month. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
When the earthquake devastated Beaumont Street, Graham Sharp's shop felt the blow. The quake shut down the family business built up by his father for more than a decade. Today, the first post-earthquake customers trickled in.
Crumb cupboards, yeah. How many would you like? 4, please.
Graham says he'll be sticking to his father's tried and true formula.
And a piece of T-bone too, please.
It was pretty well the same as what it was before, just a few specials and stuff like that. I've just got to work out what I'm going to put on, that's all.
And he's had plenty of time to think about that. Insurance red tape has held up the opening of the shop for some time.
Oh, I just had a few insurance problems and just took a bit longer than everybody else.
Perseverance is what it's all about, according to Harold Mangnall.
Nothing difficult if you want to try. Bit hard, but I'm still trying to better myself.
Harold suffered a stroke almost 15 years ago at the age of 46. He's battled the paralysis that followed for a decade and a half. Stroke is Australia's 3rd biggest killer, striking people of all ages. About 37,000 Australians have strokes each year. 300,000 have disabilities caused by them.
I worked in occupational therapy at the Royal Newcastle Hospital, and I worked with people that had a stroke. And then I had a stroke when I was at work. And I sure saw the other side, you know. It wasn't like I'd expected it to be at all. I lay in the hospital bed. I couldn't even move my eyes. I stared at a spot on the wall. I didn't know myself as a whole or the world around me as a whole. And so I didn't know what straight was, what a round was.
It's events like today's Olympics that help stimulate sufferers toward recovery. Almost 200 people competed today in events from darts and carpet bowls to euchre.
They're here, they're out. And it's a big step to come out of your own home when your life has changed, when your whole physical appearance has changed so completely.
Through a subsidiary called the Northern Districts Coal Consortium, the Mineworkers Federation is tendering for the 9 state government mines. The bid includes the Liddell State Coal Mine, even though the government has already announced the Singleton-based Cumnock Coal Company as the successful tenderer for that operation. Federation Secretary Ron Land says he believes the Cumnock tender will fall through and Liddell State will be put up again by the government. Mr Land says the major reason the Federation is bidding for the mines is to protect miners' jobs. He wouldn't guarantee that there'd be no job shedding should the union's consortium be successful, but Mr Land says his union's bid offers the best chance of continued employment for its members. This is the second time the Greiner government has called for tenders on the mines. It follows court action launched by the Mineworkers Federation to have the bidding time limit extended.
From the mouths of these people comes much wisdom. Well, that's the theory behind 20 seminars across the Hunter, giving government and youth workers the rundown on what young people want. In a casual atmosphere, the seminar looked at the lack of cheap, accessible transport, a shortage of youth accommodation, and serious health issues like drug addiction and AIDS.
We'll be producing a report which will go through the Office of Youth Affairs to the relevant state government departments in New South Wales, and we're expecting them to provide a written response to that report.
$7 million is spent statewide on the Office of Youth Affairs, and while the organisers of today's seminar think it's unlikely funding can be dramatically increased, they do believe priorities can be changed.
At 7 o'clock this morning, disenchanted health workers left their patients in the care of volunteers. This is the first time nurses have taken part in a statewide 24-hour strike. Such is their frustration with cuts to the health system.
We take no joy in withdrawing services. As I said, this is our final stand. It's the only way we can bring to the community's attention that we are having problems, big problems.
Those problems relate to maintaining health services with what the union says is a drastically reduced staff and budget. More than 100 health workers travelled to Sydney today, joining thousands of others in a protest outside Parliament House. This was no wildcat strike. The administration was put on notice a fortnight ago, and it took measures to reduce the strain on the system.
We've cancelled elective surgery today, so there's only emergency surgery proceeding in one of the theatres. Outpatients have been reduced, and certainly no admissions to the wards.
Volunteers at the John Hunter will prepare more than 1,000 meals today. The menu is simple: sandwiches for lunch and sandwiches for dinner. But patients aren't complaining. Many support the stoppage.
Well, there's not much you can do about it, but I think the nurses have got a bloody good right to be out on strike.
The industrial action will continue until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Cross-kicking to an open wing, and Matthew Wood in behind Smith. Unbelievable!
Matthew Wood has been elusive enough to score tries in 2 grand finals. Now he's slipped through the fingers of the Knights just as he seemed certain to sign.
Our arrangements with him had been finalised, but due to the pressure of several other late offers and the fact that he's a fortnight off getting married, I think it all became a bit too hard for Matthew, and he pulled the plug and said, no, I'm staying at home.
The Raiders won another major battle overnight when the New South Wales Rugby League agreed to increase their salary cap by $200,000. The decision has given the Green Machine a chance to retain several key players, and clubs like the Knights every reason to expect similar generosity from the league.
We think that our financial position, as precarious as it may be, is a considerable improvement on Canberra's at the current point of time, and therefore with some better results that I hope to post this year, I think you'll find we'll be first cab off the rank.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
think that the vertical lines and so forth and the horizontal slashes are quite brutal, but I think there's that underlying romanticism.
23-year-old David Middleton from Gloucester is a landscape artist. He uses watercolours, pastels and oils to create his images. He says music is the inspiration for much of his work. He often listens to opera while he paints. Despite the recession, David believes there is still a strong demand for colourful paintings.
People see purchasing an artwork or something as an escapist thing, so they can escape into that work. So I found that the brighter, the more colourful paintings are the ones that are moving quicker.
The exhibition will continue until the 3rd of November. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
A former world match play champion turned golf course designer, Graham Marsh, has big plans for Salamander Bay.
The standard of the golf course will be a championship standard, which means that we can hold professional tournaments there, or the top amateurs can play and the average player can get around. That's our aim, that's our goal.
The estimated completion date is December 1992. With an almost ideal landscape at his disposal, it's now up to Marsh to put together a course that will challenge the world's best without scaring away the weekend hackers.
The majority of golfers are not low handicap golfers. They're handicap of 15 or higher, and you have to get them around in a certain period of time. So we've always got that in the back of our mind. We're just not there to produce something which is going to break the average guy's back.
With the Roach Racket Resort already hosting some of the world's best tennis players on a regular basis, the prospect of international golf could see Port Stephens entrench itself as the sporting capital of the Hunter.
While Novacastrians have noticeably cut back on their watering of private lawns, usage is still too high. The board says reservoirs are holding more than 60% of capacity, and as long as they do, no mandatory restrictions will be applied. However, everyone is being urged to use as little water as possible. The longer we conserve supplies, the further off restrictions will be. But the board says if the current usage rate is maintained, cuts could be enforced within the next 2 months. These would take the form of a ban on fixed hoses and sprinklers at first, with even greater restrictions later if useful rain does not fall during summer.
Residents in the Hunter have the highest incidence of heart disease in New South Wales. More than 400 people require valve replacement and bypass surgery each year. $1.2 million was set aside this financial year to establish a cardiac unit at the John Hunter Hospital. The Director of Cardiac Surgery, Dr. Alan Boyd, says the project has been postponed due to the hospital's budget overrun. Dr. Boyd says that while it is disappointing, he believes it would be difficult to justify establishing a new service in the current financial climate. He hopes the unit will be a viable proposition next year. In a further development, the AIDS unit will be transferred from the Royal Newcastle Hospital to the John Hunter during the first week of December. The outpatient section will be housed within the Rankin Park complex. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Ventura Place was a showpiece street in Macquarie Hills. Today it was a scene of smouldering ruins and residents in shock. English tourist Andrew Haig recalled sitting in the home of his friend Kylie Smith when he sensed something was awfully wrong.
I was looking out the window at the thermometer and it was showing 34 degrees and suddenly it started to rise, 35, 36, and it was 40. I looked out the back window and it was just a wall of flames.
Kylie and Andrew ran outside and watched helplessly as the Smiths' house was engulfed in fire.
And then within 5 minutes it died down a little bit. We managed to come back, but couldn't go in the house at first because it was so thick with smoke. And then we got all the hoses going and we were trying to hose it down, but we just couldn't stop it going out.
This morning, the Smiths managed to raise a smile.
That was it, I heard it go.
But the family of 4 could do little but rummage through the charred ruins of their home, salvaging a few ornaments and some memories.
And try to piece back things that we've got. That's all we can do.
Next door neighbour Steve Rose was also sifting through the little that remained of his $250,000 home that he designed and built himself.
To come here and have a look at it last night when it was on fire, it's hard to describe how you feel about it. Just a sort of sickening feeling in your stomach.
2 years ago, these residents fought a bushfire and managed to beat the flames literally at their back door. But this time, nature won.
I got down to the corner of the street and I looked up and the whole house was just engulfed in flames, and we got nothing. All we had was basically what we were standing in at the time.
More than 7,000 hectares of land were scorched in yesterday's blaze, and today minor spot outbreaks kept firemen on full alert. Shortland electricity teams worked throughout the night and day restoring power. More than 20 poles were burnt out in Mount Hutton, Barnsley and Edgeworth. In the inferno aftermath, tales of great tragedy and good fortune. At the Tungara Centre for Deaf and Blind Preschoolers, a function room was extensively damaged, but the centre's 20 young students were safely evacuated, 3 leaving on a bus just minutes before the blaze took hold.
Had they been sleeping, it had been their little sleep time in the afternoon, it would have been very difficult. We would have had to physically have carried them out of the building, and the fire was so intense. We'd even been through fire drills and things like that, but I don't think it prepared us for the type of thing that came yesterday.
Signs of the intensity of the fire: a whiz bin melted flat on the ground, patches of wood chip lighted by the severe heat. While the Tungara Centre was saved, a kilometre away at Belmont North, another building was destroyed in the blaze. Truckie Merv Peters lost all his possessions and one of his 2 vehicles.
All the clothes have gone up and everything inside the house has gone up with it. So just now I can't even find a clean shirt.
Merv spent last night in his removalist van and doesn't know where he'll sleep tonight. Lake Macquarie Council has set up a hotline giving information to people who have suffered damage in the fire. The number is 210 426. In the north near Karua, flames destroyed bushland from the Buckets Way turn-off on the Pacific Highway to the town's outskirts. Weary firefighters spent the day backburning and removing burnt-out trees perilously close to roads. Peter Ryan, NBN News.